Everyone, today I'm going to show you what I like to call a hybrid animal in Photoshop. Since I got my new kitten Vino, as you can see here, he has such a long kind of puffy tail and he likes hopping around like a bunny, so I like to call him a lemur bunny. So I thought I would use him as part of my example and actually turn him into a lemur bunny. So I'm combining his head with a rabbit's body, and then I am putting a lemur tail on him. So I chose a few photos that I've took of my kitten. I have hundreds, if not thousands, to choose from. But then I went and just simply searched rabbit, and then I put the word isolated, because if you search isolated whenever you're searching for a specific photo, like a rabbit's body, usually most of the images that come up, as you can see, will have a white background, which makes it like a million times easier to actually cut out the body, because I am going to be piecing the rabbit's body with a lemur's tail. So again, it'll just make it so much easier on yourself for editing, and when you were cutting out a specific part of an image, if you search like rabbit isolated and then find something with a white background, it makes editing a lot easier. So I looked through some of the rabbit photos. A lot of them had watermarks on them, as you can see, because they are stock photos. So I did try to find one at an angle that I felt I could work with that didn't have any of that watermark on it. So I settled on this photo of a rabbit or a bunny. And then I right-clicked and went to copy image. And then I went back into Photoshop. I went to File, New, and it automatically highlights clipboard, and I selected Create because it detects that I copied an image, so it will automatically create the same size as that image. Then I duplicated the layer by doing the keyboard shortcut Command or Control J. You can also right click on the layer, which is the rabbit layer that I just pasted in here, and do duplicate layer. Then I decided to horizontally flip the rabbit image, so I pressed Command or Control T, where you can right click and just click flip horizontal. And then I decided to go find the lemur image that I was going to use the tail from. So like before, I just searched lemur isolated because I wanted a white background to make the cutting out part easy. So I did go ahead and just kind of look at different tails. What made me think of my cat's tail as a lemur is that whenever it sticks up and just kind of curls over, especially when he runs, it just kind of flows in the wind kind of. It really makes me think of a lemur. So I found this one and I felt that it looked as close to my cat's tail. It did have a watermark on it, if you do see that, but just for demonstration purposes, I went ahead and chose this one because a lot of these did have watermarks. And I also, please note that I selected one that was of an actual real life lemur, not a drawn one, because I want this to look like a real life animal. So I did the same thing, right clicked, copy image. I went back to my bunny image. And then I did Control or Command P, which is paste of the lemur image, or you could also go to Edit Paste, and it will paste the image that you just copied from Google in there. And I also did turn off the visibility, that little eye icon next to the lemur layer, because I was ready to go and cut out the head of my cat that I was going to use from whichever photo I chose. So after looking at the 5 that I chose, I decided on this one. I felt that the angle of his head was the closest to the rabbit's body. Hopefully you just saw, or you can go back, I double clicked on the layer of the cat photo where it said background originally to unlock it, and then I just pressed OK. And then I'm going to the third tool down on the left menu bar and selecting what is called the magnetic lasso tool. This is my favorite lasso tool out of all 3 of them because it has the word magnet, because as you can see, once I click a starting point, I'm slowly running my mouse over the outline of the cat's head and the selection that I want to ultimately cut out and put on the rabbit's body. So it does automatically detect the edge, hence why it's called a magnetic lasso tool. It's not always super accurate, and again, that's another reason why having a white background is easier. But there are a few adjustments you can do. So I right clicked and then I want to click on select and mask. Then the menu for this function pops up on the right. I always like changing the view to overlay so I can see exactly where the outline is that I created. You can see I played with some of the settings. Again, this is really personal preference, but I prefer the red outline. It's the easiest for me to see. So if you play with the radius, it can expand the outline you did. I always like to feather it a bit because it gives the actual cutout edge a much softer edge, and it's easier for blending and looking more natural when you put it in another picture. I did expand the edge a little bit and played with the feather until I was happy. Also, shifting edge, you can make it a little larger or smaller there too. Again, you just got to play with the settings to see what looks right to you. So once I was happy with the feathered selection of the edge, then you just want to press OK. Once you press OK, you can see that you go back to the normal menu and you can see the running ant selection that you just made. So there's a couple ways to do this, but I like to right click and select layer via copy. That automatically takes the selection of the original photo and creates a new layer with the cut out image. Now I want to select the cat's head by holding down Command or Control and clicking on that layer, and it'll automatically select it. Then I went back to the rabbit image and did Control or Command P for copying and pasting. And now I am just going to be resizing the cat's head and rotating it to get the correct angle to match the rabbit's body. And by doing this, or I'm using the transform tool by pressing Command or Control T. And you can see I'm just dragging it and using the corners to resize it, and then also hovering my mouse just outside the selection in order to rotate it. And once I was happy, I pressed enter and it finalized the resizing. And now I'm going to use the same method to select the lemur's tail that I'm going to use. So I turn the lemur image or the layer back on. I turned off all the others just so I can solely focus on the lemur. So again, the magnetic lasso tool, I wanted to click a start point. I accidentally moved my mouse, so I had to double click and undo it to restart the new selection. And you can see this is coming out a lot cleaner since I do have that white background and I'm just slowly going over the outline of the lemur's tail. I did cut out a little bit of the fur just to leave myself some room for blending it when I actually put on the rabbit to make it look as seamless as possible. So then I did the same thing, right click, select and mask, and it will come up automatically with the red mask overlay because that's the setting I used before. And again, I just played with the different settings like the radius, the feathering, and the different shift edge until I was happy with the exact selection. And I do really like feathering because again, it gives the edge a softer edge, hence it feathers it. So it does make blending and putting together images a lot easier. And then again, I just right clicked on the selection, selected layer via copy, and then I turned off the original lemur layer, and now we got the tail. I turned on the cat head layer again, as well as the rabbit, and so now I'm just using the move tool to position and rotate the lemur tail to how I like for it to look. I did have to play around with this a little bit. I ultimately ended up moving the rabbit image and the cat head over to the left a bit because you could see I was having some trouble fitting the lemur tail in completely, and I wanted to keep the image as large as possible. I guess I also made the rabbit image a little bit smaller, so I did end up resizing the cat's head as well, again using the transform tool by pressing Command or Control T, and then just dragging the corners and rotating it till I was happy with the angle and the size. Once I was happy with the positioning of all the three components, I then selected the original rabbit layer and zoomed in. And now I am going to work on removing the extra parts like the rabbit's nose and its ears sticking out. I want to make sure the rabbit layer is highlighted and then click the layer mask tool. You can see it's at the bottom, and then a little blank white box will pop up next to the rabbit image with like a little chain in between it. This is the most non-invasive way to erase things, and you can always add it back in case you overdo something or if you want to change it. So then I'm going to make sure that my colors are on black and white, and I want the black selected as the foreground color. Then I'm going to select the brush tool, and black, as long as it's selected with black and you want to make sure that the layer mask is highlighted, you can see there's little gray marks around it. Black takes away a part of that layer. So you can see I'm taking my brush and just non-invasively erasing like the rabbit's ears and its nose that were sticking out around the cat's head. I did zoom in and out in order to make sure that I accurately erased the proper parts. And then as the opposite, if you switch the color to white as the foreground color, that would add it back. So if you accidentally erase too much of any part of the rabbit, you could just toggle using the X on the keyboard to white, and then you would be able to add it back. And then I also erased part of the bunny's tail that was sticking out. Once I was happy with the erasing of the rabbit's body, then I selected the cat's head layer. I added another layer mask, clicking that little button that looks like a rectangle with a circle in the middle, and just adjusting the size and the hardness of my brush. I also played with the opacity. I believe you'll see, yeah, there we go, which just turns down the percent of like the color of that layer that it takes away. So again, you're gonna have to play around with it depending on what images you use and what colors. These are pretty similar in color, the cat with the black and gray along with the brown rabbit fur, so I didn't have to do too much back and forth erasing and blending, but again, it'll depend on the images you use, so just play around with it until you are happy with the way it looks. Once I was happy with how Vino's fur was blending in with the rabbit's fur, I decided to move on to the lemur tail. So I'm going to select that layer, click the layer mask button, make sure the layer mask is highlighted, and adjust my brush back up to 100% opacity. Again, I did end up playing with the opacity and the size of my brush here in order to try to blend the lemur fur as best as possible along with the rabbit's fur. So again, remember the whole point of a layer mask is you can always go back and add it in or take it away, and you can always correct anything. Unlike the eraser tool, when you erase something, it is gone for good. So that's why I prefer layer masks over using an eraser tool. I mean, every tool has their time and place. It all just depends on the outcome and what you're trying to do. So again, personal preference, but I do like this because I always want to be able to go back and fix specific things if I'm not happy with one aspect of my artwork. So again, personal preference, and there's always many different ways to achieve the same effect in Photoshop and in art in general. It's always best practice to zoom out after you edit a part of your photo just to see how it looks as a whole, because it can be different or seem different than when it is zoomed in. So it's always good to go back and check. But I was happy with that at that point, and then I did decide to go in and work on the cat's ear a little bit because I felt like the edge of like the ear fur was a little harsh. So I did take my my brush using the black color to subtract some of the ear fur to just kind of blend it more so and make it look softer there, you can see. So at this point I was getting into more of the finite details, but this is the overall gist of how to blend the three components or three different body parts of animals to make it a whole. So I wanted to lighten up the cat's chest and like neck for a little bit because obviously the rabbit's fur is a little bit lighter. And I did that by using the dodge tool. It's kind of in the middle of the menu bar on the left, and you just have to hold down your mouse and then select dodge, which means lightning. and that comes from actual terms of photography. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. And then I did go and use the burn tool, which makes the selected layer or the image darker, and I did that on the rabbit's fur to try to make the colors as even as possible. I was happy with the results that the Dodge and the burn tool gave me, but I did want to make the cat's fur just a little bit more brown, closer to the rabbit's fur. So I used the color picker tool, and I picked out one of the kind of mid-tones of brown from the rabbit's fur. Then I created a new layer and just used a soft brush with the opacity turned down, and kind of just colored over on the like the line where the cat's neck and the rabbit's fur overlap. And then I played around with the different blending modes. As you could see, I decided on overlay. That's kind of my go-to one. I feel blends the most, but you know, just play around with whichever one you think looks best. And I also did play with the opacity. And I was happy with my overall image of this. I did decide to go and click the text tool just to add a little description of the animals that I combined. So I decided to call this a lemur bunny kitty, because that is what I call my kitten sometimes when he's going crazy and jumping around. Makes me think of a lemur and a bunny, so he's a lemur bunny kitty. Again, you don't have to do that, but it gives the viewer some more context so that they know exactly what animals you did combine, so it does make it a little bit easier to understand. And that is my finished lemur bunny kitty. Then I just went through the same process of saving my image as a JPEG, which you go to File, Export As, and then save wherever you save your images on your computer or whatever device you're working on. I did crop it a little bit to center the actual creature some more. It would look great if you added a background. You can really get as crazy and creative or as simple as you would like. So if you do choose to do this, please send me your images, because I would love to see your hybrid animals that you come up with, and stay tuned for more. Bye.